My name is Allison Tiemann, and today I'm going to talk about how men's rights is a dead end and what to do about it. I hope you enjoy this content. Erin Pizzey founded the first battered women's shelter in the entire world, Chiswick Women's Aid. She started it in the UK in 1971. Her shelter was the first of its kind, focused on getting women out of abusive situations in order to break the cycle of abuse. That shelter is now called The Refuge, and it exists to this day. Erin helped build an international network of support for female victims of domestic violence, and her shelter inspired thousands more shelters across the globe. All of this history you can read on Erin's Wikipedia page. But there's another shelter that she started that you won't find on her page, one that vanished from history. Almost nobody knows about it. Because Erin was also the first person to start a shelter for male victims of domestic violence. Erin noticed that more than half of the women who came through her shelter doors were as violent or more violent than the men they left. And Erin almost immediately recognized the need for a shelter for men and sought to create one. But unlike Chiswick Women's Aid, Erin's men's shelter didn't go on to inspire an international system of men's shelters. It didn't even survive. The wealthy financiers, the same wealthy financiers who opened their wallets when Erin asked for funds to save women, turned their backs on her when she asked to help save men. She couldn't keep her men's shelter afloat financially, and it had to close its doors almost as quickly as they opened. Not just that, but Erin was soon facing huge backlash from an establishment invested in the idea that women have it worse when it comes to domestic violence. I like to call this establishment the Women Worsters, short for Women Always Have It Worse. The Women Worsters drove Erin out of her own shelter and the organization she founded. Her sin was to tell the world that men are equally important victims of domestic violence. For that, she was ostracized, silenced, and marginalized for decades. The founder of women's domestic violence refuges around the world became a name no one dared to speak. There are many more stories exactly like Erin's, stories of people who wanted to help men and they came up against an angry, oppressive silence or outright persecution. I usually ask a question about here in these kinds of videos. I ask you if you're someone who likes our content, thinks we can make a real difference, and can support financially but currently doesn't, to tell me why, and to send the answers to topic@badgerpod.com. I'm going to add something to that request. If you do want to support more directly, Erin Pizzey is currently involved with the Mankind UK initiative, a charity helpline supporting male victims of domestic violence. In 2016, when Mankind UK was close to closing its doors, I sent a tweet to the Gamergate charity hashtag. Since then, it's been featured on Kotaku in Action and has managed to not only make its funding goals in 2016, but has been funded through 2018. And if your answer to why you don't support Honey Badger Radio is, I want to do something to help men in need directly, then do it. Make a pledge to help Mankind UK. The link is in the low bar. There's a reason why I keep asking this question. If you care about these issues, if you believe Honey Badger Radio can make a difference, and you can support, why don't you? What I'm asking you when I ask that question, when I ask you to think long and hard on the answer to that question, what I'm asking you to ask yourself is, what motivates you? In 2011, The Guardian wrote a piece about men being raped in wartime. The article describes how men aren't simply just raped, but subject to horrific sexual torture. The article reports on the work of the Refugee Law Project, an organization that helps war refugees get medical treatment for their injuries. Quoting the author of the Guardian article, I speak with Dr. Angela Nintinda, who treats referrals from the Refugee Law Project, or RLP. She tells me 8 out of 10 patients from the RLP will be talking about some sort of sexual abuse. 8 out of 10 men, I clarify? No, men and women, she says. What about men? I think all the men. I'm aghast. All of them, I say? Yes, she says. All the men. All of the male war refugees, Dr. Ntinda, all of them that she treats, are also victims of rape. Men are victims of wartime rape at a rate comparable to that of women. But like Erin Pizzey trying to help male victims of domestic violence, organizations trying to help male rape victims encounter not just silence about the problem, but outright anger that they would even bring it up. The Guardian article continues with an interview of Chris Dolan, director of the Refugee Law Project. The RLP produced a documentary in 2010 called Gender Against Men. When it was screened, Dolan says that attempts were made to stop him by people in well-known international aid agencies. Dolan says, "There is a fear among them that this is a zero-sum game, that there's a predefined cake, and if you start talking about men, you're going to somehow eat a chunk of this cake that's taken them a long time to bake." Dolan points to a November 2006 UN report that followed an international conference on sexual violence in his area of East Africa. I know for a fact that the people behind the report insisted on a definition of rape that was restricted to women. He says, adding that one of the RLP's donors, Dutch Oxfam, refused to provide any more funding unless he'd promised that 70% of his client base was female. Dolan talks about a zero-sum game, and I disagree with his assessment. This isn't a zero-sum game pitting male victims against female. Calling it a zero-sum game is creating too rosy a picture. It's a negative-sum game. The negative-sum game goes as follows. If a social problem is perceived to primarily affect women, we care. If it's perceived to affect women because they're women, we care even more. If we make male victims of that social ill visible, we don't just split our care between male and female victims. We stop caring about that social problem entirely. If a problem affects 50 women, it will get funding. If it's seen to also affect an additional 50 men, the funding isn't doubled or even split between the two groups. It's yanked entirely, and we stop caring about solving the problem, even if that means leaving those 50 female victims out in the cold. The men's issues movement, and the moment we get recognition of men's issues, we get male victims of a problem recognized, people lose all motivation to help all victims of that problem, including the women. That's the negative-sum game. Aid organizations like Refugee Law Center and Dutch Oxfam know the negative-sum game exists. Bring attention to male victims, and female victims will be ignored too. That's why they do what they do. That's why whenever significant numbers of male victims of any issue are found, the first response by anyone with the power to do it is to start hiding their existence. When I started this, I thought logic and reason and justice would win the day. Now I realize because of the negative-sum game, it won't. Skeptics, anti-feminists, anti-social justice, even men's rights advocates and activists, and I include myself in this, we are all fools, just hecklers in the audience of a play on a vast stage. We think we're smart because we can see through the pretense. We know it's just a story, a narrative, a lie. Some of us even get up on stage and grab an actor and rip off her mask and say, "Look, she's not really that character. She's playing a part." And the theater troupe grabs us and shoves us off stage, and people in the audience either boo us for ruining their fun or tell us, "Yeah, you're right. It's not real. It's totally fake." And as soon as they're done telling us, they're back watching the play and suspending disbelief. Do you know why we're all fools? Because social justice and feminism, it's not supposed to make sense. It's not even supposed to be real. It's not even supposed to be just. It's theater. All it needs to do is motivate people and suspend disbelief just enough to bring people together in a common moral landscape for a common goal. And when I say moral, I do not mean just. And this is the one argument against recognizing men's issues that I struggle with, and has never been explicitly made by Women Worster. Instead, they attack the logic or legitimacy of men's issues, or they attack me. They never point out the profound truth that their motivational system, well, it motivates. It motivates. Women worsting lights a fire under people's asses. Listen and believe is a great sales pitch. Everyone wants to save women. Men want to save women. And they want to be told over and over that they are the only men throughout all of human history and around the world who wants to save women. And women want to be saved. They want to be put over and over into peril, or the perception of peril, and pulled out again to prove that others value them. Men want to feel strong and moral, and women want to feel saved. Recognizing male victims does not make men feel strong or women feel saved. Recognizing male victims has no motivational value. And this is where the negative-sum game that all men's issues advocates struggle to oppose comes from. Men run away from feeling weak. Women run toward feeling valued. Women worsting gives us all something to care about. Men's issues takes that away. And without something to care about, who are we? What are we? Where are we going? How do we judge ourselves? And if we have no metric to judge ourselves against, do we have a self at all? If we take out the motivational engine of society, then what happens? Do we stagnate? Does everything fall to pieces? Do we all starve? What right do I have to challenge a motivational system that works? That's got us here. It gets men up in the morning, fixing power lines, cleaning sewers, writing code. It gets women in the mall buying clothes and cosmetics because they're worth it. And that system keeps us all of us, male and female both, fed and sheltered. Where are we without it? And what right do I have to challenge it and propose to replace it with something that does not work? This is the one counter-argument that has made me question the legitimacy of everything I'm doing. Everything. But there is just one thing, one niggling doubt. This system runs on finding things to save women from. Intersectional women worsting is simply the process of finding new sources of female vulnerability among minority issues and recasting those issues as women's issues. Women and children is now women and minorities, and every problem related to protecting minorities and immigrants like they are children can be laid at the feet of this desire to save women. And what's the save women's endgame? What is its endgame? Well, apparently the next big thing to save women from is the system itself. Patriarchy, male privilege, toxic masculinity, all symptoms of a system that hates women. So war on women. Me Too has created a world driven by extrajudicial punishment. Men are no longer afforded a trial before they're subject to punishment. To do so would be to violate, listen, and believe the absolute sanctity of a woman's claim of victimhood. A woman's claim of victimhood is now sacred. And of course, women can't be denied access to any part of society, so women are allowed everywhere, bringing their ability to level an unquestionable allegation or accusation with them. What happens when one group is primarily responsible for the running of society, and another is granted the unassailable right to remove that first group from their positions running society? What happens is that our institutions will inevitably dissolve under the pressure of saving women. And the one thing that can challenge this inevitable system's collapse is, of course, the one thing we refuse to look at. That's right, men's issues. If men's rights wasn't a dirty word, then men's rights to due process, the right to innocent till proven guilty, wouldn't currently be under attack. And by under attack, I mean being stripped away entirely. If we hadn't been subject to half a century of one-sided science on sexual harassment and abuse, we would recognize male victims on equal terms to female victims, which means Me Too, if it did occur, would never become another iteration of the same urge to save women from male sexuality, toxic male sexuality. We would have to consider what happens when women are faced with a world where an accusation alone means a conviction and the end of their career. And we might be less inclined to see an internet lynch mob strip away her life. So the question of whether or not I have the right to propose an untested system of motivation is moot. Our current one is going tits up. We are going to end up saving women from everything and anything, which means we are going to destroy anything and everything in our quest to save women. And so we come back to the negative sum game. The reason why men's issues never get traction. As soon as people recognize that men are also victims, they stop caring at all. That might actually be a benefit, since you can use recognition of male victims to quell outrage culture and bring the discussion of social ills and their solution away from overheated narratives and into the realm of science and reason. But the problem of motivation itself remains. Without a system of motivation, our society goes nowhere fast. So how do we go through the eye of that needle? How do we successfully challenge the negative sum game? How do we create a system of motivation inclusive of men's issues? That's why this is the most important question I've ever asked you. If you like Honey Badger Radio's content, if you want to see something done about these issues, why don't you support us? Tell me what will motivate you to care. If you don't like us, it's obvious why you don't want to support us, and it is understandable. It is perfectly understandable because we are not for everyone. There's no need to explain. If you care about these issues, but you're not convinced that investing in solving the negative sum game is the answer, which is what we do, we try to solve the negative sum game, then I've got a link to Mankind UK in the low bar. But let me tell you, if we can solve the negative sum game, that will be the moment that Justin Trottier's phone rings off the hook with offers for aid to set up men's domestic violence shelters across Canada. It'll be the moment Mankind UK opens up its fundraiser for 2019, January 1st at sunrise, and is funded through 2029 by sunset. It'll be the moment Diana Davidson's email box is stuffed full of requests to consult with lawmakers and legislators on legal protections for the wrongly accused. And if that sounds like the world you want to make, and you have the means, and you do like our content, and you do want to take a stab at solving the most profound puzzle of our times, then ask yourself, why don't you support us? Ask yourself, what would motivate you to support? We've found 600 of you with the mad courage to defy the central motivation of our entire society, to give something of yourselves against all odds. When I asked you, why don't you support, you answered, why not? And defied the negative sum game. This number is proof that it's possible to successfully challenge the negative sum game. Every one of you who makes up this number, you were the first to challenge the negative sum game. You give me hope. Because whenever I think, no, there's no way we can defeat the negative sum game, and what right do I have even to try? I talk to you. I see you. And I know it can be done. Because you did it. And maybe if you're one of our listeners who hasn't yet defied the negative sum game and become a supporter, maybe when you do, you'll be the one who will explain to the world how they can do it too. And we'll stop having to destroy everything and anything to save women from anything and everything. So change your motivation. Let's solve the negative sum game. www.feedthebadger.com. Thank you. Now on to some business. I want to apologize for being scarce the last few months. I've recently been dealing with some serious health issues. Heart palpitations, fainting spells, severe exhaustion, depression, and anxiety. My doctor has finally figured out what was wrong with me after a series of blood tests. It's nothing to worry about. The solution is simple and straightforward. I was experiencing the negative fallout of several vitamin deficiencies, and they were caught in time before any permanent damage was done. So I will supplement, and I should be good as new very shortly. We are also going to be transitioning our content on this channel, moving our live streams over to Badger live streams and focusing on pre-recorded and scripted content on Honey Badger Radio, our main channel. Stuff that's more shareable. Finally, it's been sort of a rough tax season for Honey Badger Radio, and I'm sure it's been rough for everyone. And it's always rough around this time of year. And it's nerve-wracking when people stop supporting because it reminds me of just how daunting that negative sum game is. So I appreciate everyone who's stuck with us, despite the difficulties of the season, and anyone else who makes the choice to challenge the negative sum game and support us in the future. I can't express how much your support means to me. There are so many things I want to show you that I've discovered. Amazing and fascinating things about the human heart. Your heart. Things that will make the negative sum game seem less impossible. Honey Badger patrons and supporters are going to be the first to hear these things, so please stay tuned. Now on to the mailbag. Okay, I want to thank Thomas for this very cryptic card. I'll be sure to show it to Teal Deer, and thank you for your donation of $400 US as well. It's greatly appreciated. And Jonathan says that this card is the most masculine and cryptic card he's ever seen. And finally, Mr. Stone, I read your letter and I'm very sorry for the abuse you suffered. And the last section of this letter made me seethe. Let's imagine, instead of recreating lynching culture, let's imagine Me Too in an alternate dimension where the movement focused on empowering male victims of female sexual abuse to report their abuse to the police and having the police take it seriously, essentially giving male victims of women the same protections that women get. Not taking away women's right to due process, not having them destroyed by the internet lynch mob, just a movement to grant men the same protection of law against female abusers as women enjoy about male abusers. Wouldn't that be something? Thank you for your donation, Mr. Stone. Wherever you go, whatever you do, remember you solved the negative sum game, and you carry the solution inside you. Everything you've endured has made you able to do something most people cannot. Even if you don't believe me, you probably won't when I say this. What's inside you is precious. Protect it, Mr. Stone. And if you're listening and you've gotten this far, and you've decided to want to take a stab at solving the negative sum game for yourself, you can become a per-episode patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Okay, I already screwed this up. Click the I. The benefit of Patreon is an excellent content delivery system, but if you prefer to go more independent, then there are one-time and monthly subscription options at www.feedthebadger.com. And there's another shout out I want to do to Daniel, who donated almost the entire cost of Hannah's wage for the month of March or April, and left another very cryptic message. You guys are killing me here with these messages. Disgusted Peterson Monday, figured it out, hope a better 27 now. Hashtag what happened April 26th. So, I mean, if you're listening, Daniel, and you want to clear up my confusion, you can always just send a message to topic@badgerpod.com. And Thomas, please do consider explaining these cryptic messages. because they sound really fascinating. I love to know the story behind them, but they are very baffling. And I also want to say that if you want to send a check like Thomas did directly, then you can send it to P.O. Box 990, Kelvington, Saskatchewan, Canada, care of Allison Tiemann, S0W1W0. So you can send it to our mailing address. And I just want to thank everyone who supports us. Not only do you make it possible for me to be able to pay Hannah and Brian and Max and Ed, you also, like I said, you make me realize that there is hope. That we can together change the negative sum game. So thank you.